what the hell is going on in Kyiv and why are you doing it again, Volodymyr Zelenskyy? We just got to know your government and it was working, so why are you doing it? Volodymyr Zelenskyy cannot afford corruption at all, especially in the United States, especially with Donald Trump. Being the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States government is the second most difficult job in the Ukrainian government. Being Volodymyr Zelenskyy is a little bit harder.
Hello and welcome to the Independence Avenue Media. My name is Maria Ulyanovska. It's been quite a week for Ukraine, both in Kyiv, with a major government reshuffle followed by protests, and in Washington, D.C., where the lawmakers keep pushing for tougher sanctions on Russia. Meanwhile, Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S. asked to resign after only 8 months in this position. Joining me to unpack all of this is Melinda Haring, a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and one of the top American experts on Ukraine. Melinda, thank you for joining us. Let's start with a very hot topic for Ukraine. The Defense Minister Mykhailo Fedorov was dismissed, and that followed with a bunch of protests all over Ukraine that even made headlines in the major American media outlets. From what you see in Washington, how is this developments being viewed in Washington, D.C.?
Maria, it's great to be with you. So in Washington, the sacking of Fedorov is greeted with confusion. No one understands why Zelenskyy made this decision. Fedorov has an excellent reputation in Washington. I've hosted him at the Atlantic Council. He is well known in the tech circles, both in Silicon Valley and the sort of defense tech circles here in the greater DC area. So people are totally perplexed why Volodymyr Zelenskyy, whom many of us regard as a great statesman, would cut his own legs off and for no reason that makes any sense, take out his most competent minister. And there's not even a real comparison here, Maria. Mykhailo Fedorov is the most competent minister that Zelensky's had in his government since 2019. So we're all waiting for an explanation. There are some explanations that are sort of circulating, but none of them really make a lot of sense.
So this is all happening also in the middle of a big government reshuffle in Ukraine. So the government that's been in power for less than a year is now being dismissed. How is this viewed in the U.S.? Is this more of a domestic political issue, or can it raise broader concerns about Ukraine's stability and reform agenda?
Zelenskyy was planning to reshuffle his government in the fall, but he has done it earlier than what was expected. We're still trying to figure out why. More broadly, Americans aren't that interested in the details of the Ukrainian government. It's sort of seen as an internal domestic matter. But because Zelenskyy has changed his government 3 times now during the war, it does ask some questions. What the hell is going on in Kyiv? And why are you doing it again, Volodymyr Zelenskyy? We just got to know your government and it was working, so why are you doing it? So we see a fight between Syrsky, the main general of the armed forces of Ukraine, and Mykhailo Fedorov. And I think, to put it simply, you have an old dinosaur who favors manpower, and you have a young man who's 35 years old, who's brilliant, who's modest, who's from Zaporizhia Oblast, who doesn't speak English, right? And there's no problem that's too big for him. He's so low-key and easy to work with, and Zelenskyy likes working with him. He put him in charge of the ministry. He put him in charge of the ministry to transform Ukraine's old state institutions and bring Ukraine into the modern world. Make Ukraine Estonia, basically, is what he did. And he did it very, very well. And then he kept being promoted. So it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, especially to younger people in Ukraine. It's fine. Zelenskyy is the democratically elected leader of Ukraine, and he has the right to have the government that he chooses. But he also owes his people an explanation for why he's making these changes, particularly at the Ministry of Defense and the armed forces of Ukraine. Those are very sensitive positions in a war, but it does ask a bigger question. Why are you changing horses again in the middle of a war when Ukraine is finally on top and doing well? Again, I have so many questions, and I would love to call up Volodymyr Zelenskyy now and have a chat.
So we haven't seen a lot of reaction from the officials in the US, neither from the administration nor from Congress, which is understandable. But I know also that you speak closer to people on the Hill and people who do influence these decisions. Do you think that this could affect confidence in Ukraine's government and maybe affect relationship with Washington?
Not really. I was on the Hill all last week speaking to Republicans and Democrats, and not one member of Congress brought up this internal shuffle in Ukraine. Right now, the focus of discussion is the terrible death of Senator Graham. And remember, he was just in Ukraine. Ukraine was central to his life and legacy. And he wants to see the Russian sanctions bill passed. And his friends and members of Congress are laser focused on passing that. So my discussions this week were focused on the Senate sanctions bill and how to make sure that both sides get what they want and that this bill is finally put into law. So will Congress be upset about it? Will they freak out about it? No, I think there are questions, though, about the current Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, Olga Stefanishina, who's also still relatively new. And right now, the Ukrainian news is saying that she is likely to leave and that she's under an order of suspicion from the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine for buying an apartment in Kyiv under market prices. If that's true, she better get back to Kyiv as soon as possible. Volodymyr Zelenskyy needs Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. Volodymyr Zelenskyy cannot afford corruption at all, especially in the United States, especially with Donald Trump. So look, Volodymyr Zelenskyy needs to be clean as a whistle, and he has a problem, and he knows it. Yermak wasn't clean. To his great credit, he got rid of Yermak. There's accusations right now that part of the struggle we're seeing between the Defense Minister Mykhailo Fedorov and Syrskyi, the leader of the armed forces of Ukraine, is about corruption. That Fedorov didn't want to do things the old way, and he wanted to clean up the procurement system. And that seems to be one of the major points of friction between these two guys. If that's true, that's a big problem. And look, Zelenskyy has gotten a pass on corruption for a long time because of the war. I don't think it's going to work this time.
So I want to go back to the question of Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S. So it seems like Olga Stefanishina is in her lame duck period, and you have argued that no one wants to be Ukraine's ambassador to the United States.
I have.
Why do you think this has become such a difficult position to fill?
So being the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States government is the second most difficult job in the Ukrainian government. Being Volodymyr Zelenskyy is a little bit harder. But look, to be serious for a minute, this position comes with huge risk and little reward. So Oksana Markarova is the most brilliant ambassador that the Ukrainian government has ever put in this position. She mastered it. She had Zelensky's trust. She knew every member of Congress. She had heft, she had depth, she knew the economic issues, she knew her brief, she'd been a minister of the economy, and she spoke perfectly fluent English. She was absolutely excellent at it. But she did make a mistake. She had a political misjudgment back in Pennsylvania, and President Zelenskyy ultimately decided to remove her. But it's important for ambassadors, for countries to change up their leadership. And sometimes you need a different kind of leader that's going to relate to a different kind of person. So Zelenskyy replaced her and put Olga Stefanishina in her place. Olga Stefanishina is a different kind of animal. She is a lawyer. She is not direct. She's completely indirect. She's very smart. She has Zelensky's trust. She's very glamorous. She can talk to people on the Hill. And she's built a lot of relationships here in D.C. Look, my point is this. No one wants this job because it's not a career enhancer and it's really easy to screw up. There are landmines everywhere. You have to work with members of Congress. You also have to work with Donald Trump and his administration. Donald Trump does not like Volodymyr Zelenskyy. It's like you wake up in the morning and like there are no positive ways to ace this test. That's my point. So I think Zelenskyy is going to have a hard time finding an appropriate person to replace Olga Stefanishina. It's really to replace Oksana Markarova. Oksana Markarova is a legend in Washington, and he needs to replace Stefanishina with someone who has her stature. Now, if I were talking to Volodymyr Zelenskyy and having a nice cup of tea, I would say, Mr. Zelenskyy, please be very smart about this nomination. Send someone from Odessa, send someone who's glamorous, send someone who can pray. They can be Jewish, it doesn't matter. But someone who's comfortable in a religious setting and someone who's comfortable in nightclubs. You need someone who has a wide range of appeals and someone who can relate to a lot of people. You need someone who's funny, that's really important, and someone who's very comfortable with business. And they better like Florida. That would be my advice to Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
So speaking about this topic also, someone who has been to Florida multiple times and who, as of July 17th evening, seems to be the most possible person to fill this position is former Minister of Defense, former Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov. Do you think he's a good fit?
Rustem Umerov was a disaster as the Minister of Defense, and he hasn't had any accountability for his poor performance. Ukraine is good at figuring out how to use its diplomats. Rustem Umerov is a very good negotiator, and he's very good in a Middle Eastern context. He's fluent in Turkish, and I think he's fluent in Arabic as well. So he was used in high-level negotiations. And when Ukraine wants to run down the clock and not get anything done but make people feel good, you send in Rustem. When you want to send in an attack dog, you send in Sergei Kyslytsya. When you want to get stuff done, you call Kyslytsya. Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has gotten more sophisticated. I would not put Rustem Umerov in the post here. He's a lightweight, he's disorganized, and he's going to need a really strong chief of staff. Can he tell jokes? Yeah, he can tell jokes. He has family in Florida, but he doesn't know his brief, and I'm afraid he's going to be eaten alive if he's appointed.
One final topic I wanted to discuss here is the Russia sanctions bill that has gained a lot of momentum in Senate this week. Do you believe that the bill can become a law before Congress recession in August?
It depends on the internal negotiations, and that's a boring answer. But right now, there's opposition in the Democratic Party, and they're working things out right now. So honestly, I don't think anyone knows the answer to that question. I certainly hope so. It would be in line with keeping with the legacy of Lindsey Graham. He wanted nothing more than to see the sanctions bill pass. So it would be fitting for Republicans and Democrats to finally work together and pass this.
There's 61 co-sponsor in Senate, so there is no question that it will pass in Senate. The question is now the House. And I think Gregory Mix has voiced concerns about this bill. Can you help us understand what are the concerns of Democrats to impose these sanctions on Russia, and if any other with concerns with President Trump too?
Sure. So the Democrats don't like this bill because it contains tariffs and they're against tariffs. So in part, it's a principal objection. The more philosophical objection, though, is that the bill will not accomplish anything productive. And so right now, both sides are having arguments about will the authorities in this particular proposal accomplish what we say they will. They're having these sort of economic arguments right now. But I would urge them to step back. There's two pieces of it that are very good. It does put strong sanctions on the shadow fleet finally in place. So that's important. And the second thing that it would do, if Congress were to pass it, it would encourage the European Union to finally pass another round of sanctions. The EU's stuck. So this might unlock the EU as well.
Do you think it would be a significant bill if passed?
I think this bill would be significant as passed. More broadly, though, look, it's not a 10, right? On a 1 to 10 scale, it's not a 10. I'm not going to proclaim that it's, super strong. But the point is that Congress hasn't done anything for Ukraine since Donald Trump came into office. I want to see Congress passing more Ukraine bills. So the act of passing something is a good thing in and of itself.